Hello everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Bulletin. Today, we're diving into a truly touching and fascinating story. One that reveals a side of Lee Min-ho many people have never seen before. It's the heartfelt insight behind the headline. He was born that way, Lee Min-ho's mother on his deep reverence for motherhood. What shaped his gentle heart? Where did this profound respect begin? And why is his mother's confession moving so many fans? Let's uncover the full story, starting right now. The lights were too bright for a moment like this. Cameras love shine, love spectacle, love the polished surface of celebrity life. But that day, behind the carefully arranged smiles and the practiced posture, there was a strange tension in the air, like the room itself knew something was about to be revealed that couldn't be undone. Lee Min-ho sat with a kind of calm that makes people assume confidence comes easily to him. He looked composed, almost untouchable. The familiar image fans have carried for years, the actor who seems born for the spotlight. The man whose name alone can command a crowd. Those closest to him noticed it first, small details that didn't belong to the usual script. The way his fingers briefly tightened around a water bottle. His gaze lowered, not in shyness, but in careful restraint, as if he was holding something inside. Then his mother appeared. She didn't walk in like someone chasing attention. She didn't have the hungry energy that sometimes surrounds celebrity families. She moved with quiet certainty. A person develops after living through storms without needing applause. The room shifted as soon as she spoke. It wasn't because she was loud. It was because she didn't sound rehearsed. She sounded real. And real is dangerous. When you hear real in a world built on edited narratives, you lean closer without meaning to. You forget to breathe. You start wondering what will be said that cannot be taken back. Someone asked the question that had been floating around for years. Dressed up in different forms every time, why does Lee Min-ho speak about mothers the way he does? Why does he carry that unusual tenderness in interviews? That careful respect when the topic turns to motherhood, family, sacrifice? Why does he always seem to draw a line, sharp and unwavering, when it comes to women who have carried life, raised life, fought to keep life together? His mother didn't answer right away. She looked at him first. And in that brief pause, something almost cracked open in the room. It wasn't the silence of indecision. The silence of a person deciding how much truth the world deserves. Then she said it. He was born that way. The words didn't land softly. They hit like a bell struck in a cathedral, clear, ringing, impossible to ignore. People laughed nervously at first, expecting a sweet, harmless anecdote. But her eyes didn't match the tone of a casual story. There was pride there. Yes, but also something darker. Something that looked like memory with sharp edges. And then she began to talk. Not about awards. Not about fame. Not about the glamorous milestones the world expects to hear from the parent of a global star. Talked about the beginning, about a baby who seemed to recognize pain before he could even name it. About a child who reacted to the world as if he'd arrived already understanding that mothers carry invisible weight. She described moments that didn't fit the usual narrative of celebrity childhoods. There was no fairy tale, no effortless shine. Instead, there were late nights, quiet rooms, long hours where time stretched thin. She spoke of exhaustion with the blunt honesty of someone who has been tired in ways that don't go away with sleep. Some babies cry because they want something. Her voice steady. He cried when he felt something. That line was the first crack in the polished surface. Because it suggested something unsettling, that Lee Min-ho's sensitivity wasn't learned from interviews or public relations coaching. It was instinct. It was built into him. She told them about how, even as a toddler, he would look toward adults with a seriousness that made people uncomfortable. When a woman nearby looked stressed, when her shoulders rose, when her voice tightened, he would stop what he was doing and stare, as if he could see the pressure in her chest. Sometimes he'd toddle over and place a small hand on her arm. Sometimes he'd bring her something silly, like a toy, as if offering a ridiculous object could somehow lighten her burden. People might call it cute, she said. But she didn't. She called it strange. Not in a bad way, strange in the way you say a storm is strange when it appears out of clear sky. And then she dropped the first shock. There was a time, she said, when I thought something was wrong with him. The room stiffened. The cameras didn't blink. The air felt thinner. She explained that his empathy was so intense, so immediate, that it didn't behave like normal childhood behavior. He didn't just notice when she was upset, he absorbed it. He carried it. He acted like it was his responsibility to fix it. Refused to eat if he thought she was worried. He would stay silent for hours if he sensed tension in the house. He would watch her face the way a soldier watches the horizon. I remember thinking, he's too young to look at me like that, she said. It was as if he already knew what it means to be tired for someone else. That was the moment the story stopped being sweet and started becoming unsettling. Because the implication wasn't just that he respected motherhood, it was that he had been haunted by it. She spoke about a kind of pressure mothers endure that no one photographs, the invisible labor, the constant calculation, the fear of failing, the self-erasure people casually call love. She never used big words with him when he was little. Never explained sacrifice as a concept. But somehow he seemed to understand it without being taught. Then she told them about an incident that changed everything. It happened when he was still small enough to be carried, she said. She had taken him somewhere crowded, somewhere loud, where the world pressed in too tightly. At some point, a woman nearby began to cry. Softly. Not politely. It was the kind of crying that has nowhere to hide. People around her reacted the way crowds often do, by pretending not to notice. Eyes shifted away. Conversations continued. The social rule was clear, don't touch another person's grief. But Lee Min-ho, still a child, turned toward the sound like it was a siren. He reached out. He twisted in his mother's arms, leaning toward the stranger, and began to cry too. His mother thought he was scared by the noise. She tried to soothe him, but he kept looking at the woman. He kept reaching. And when she lowered him to the floor, he walked straight toward that sobbing stranger, and placed his small hands on her knees as if anchoring her to the world. She looked down at him, his mother said. For the first time her voice wavered, and she stopped crying. A tightness filled the room. It wasn't the sweetness of the moment. It was the shock of what it revealed, a child responding to a woman's grief with direct, wordless compassion, without being told, without being guided, knowing who she was. Then the woman did something that still haunted Lee Min-ho's mother. She grabbed his hands and whispered something to him. His mother couldn't hear. The crowd swallowed the words. But Lee Min-ho's expression changed. He stopped crying. He stared at the woman like he was listening to a secret. Later, when they were home, he repeated the words. "Mom," he had said, in a voice too serious for his age. She said mothers don't get to cry. His mother stared at him, stunned. Because she knew exactly what the woman meant. And she knew exactly why those words were poisonous. Mothers do cry, but they often do it behind doors, in bathrooms, in the silent corners of their own lives. Because the world punishes them for showing it. She asked him where he heard that. He told her about the crying woman. And, without prompting, he added something that made her blood run cold. Mothers don't cry, he said. Then who cries for them? No one laughed after that. No one found it cute. His mother said she went to bed that night and didn't sleep. He kept thinking about a child asking a question that sounded like an indictment of the entire world. A question too big for bedtime. For a child's chest. From that day forward, she said, he began to watch mothers differently. Her, every mother. He noticed the tired ones on buses. He noticed the ones carrying groceries and children at the same time. He noticed the ones arguing with cashiers because they were stressed. And instead of judging them the way people do, he looked at them like they were drowning. And then came the second shock, because his mother didn't paint herself as a saint. She admitted what most people hide. There were days, she said, when I wasn't gentle. The room held its breath again. She said she was human. She was exhausted. She was afraid. She had responsibilities that didn't care about her feelings. She sometimes snapped. Sometimes raised her voice. Sometimes said words she regretted. And when I did, she said, he didn't get angry. He got protective. Protective. Of her. What broke something in the room? A child protecting his mother from herself. From her own exhaustion. A child trying to be the adult in moments where the adult was breaking. One day, she said, she scolded him harshly for something small. He stood there, silent, eyes wide. She expected tears or defiance. Instead, he walked into the kitchen, climbed onto a chair, brought her a glass of water with both hands like an offering. I thought he was apologizing, she said. But he said, "Mom, drink. Your voice hurts. Your voice hurts. Not you hurt me, not I'm scared. But your voice hurts." It was as if his instinct was always to look at the mother first. Her pain even when he was the one being scolded. She said she cried in the bathroom that day, angry at herself and terrified by what her child seemed to understand. And that is where the story turned from emotional to tense in a new way. Because now the question wasn't simply why Lee Min-ho respects motherhood. The question became, what did he see? He learned from watching a mother survive. What kind of household creates a child who carries that kind of awareness like a scar? His mother didn't reveal every detail, but she hinted at enough to make the room feel like it was standing on unstable ground. She spoke about financial pressure, about uncertainty, about a kind of stress that makes a home feel like it's holding its breath. She spoke about times when she had to smile for her child and then collapse when he wasn't looking. And somehow, she said quietly, he always knew. Always knew. That was the phrase that echoed. Learned. Not told. Knew. She said that as he got older, he began to speak out whenever he saw people mocking mothers. Kid at school joked about someone's mom being too strict. Lee Min-ho snapped back. Not with violence. With a kind of moral fury that made other children uneasy. You don't know what she carries, he would say. And then, in his teenage years, came the moment his mother said she'll never forget. The moment that, according to her, the depth of whose reverence was not a performance. It was a core belief that would cost him if necessary. School event, she said. A stage. A microphone. Parents in the crowd. Teachers watching. Teenagers trying to look cool. A mother in the audience was being ridiculed quietly by some students. The kind of cruel whispering kids do when they think adults can't hear, laughing at her clothes, her hair. The way she looked old, it was petty. It was mean. It was common. Lee Min-ho heard it. He went on stage later for something unrelated. A small speech, nothing dramatic. But once the microphone was in his hand, he stopped reading his prepared lines. The teacher stiffened. The room grew uneasy. Improvisation is risky in public. He looked out at the crowd and said, if you laugh at someone's mother, you're laughing at the person who kept you alive. The air changed instantly. The whispers died. Continued, voice shaking with anger. You don't have to love your mother. But you don't get to mock someone else's. His mother said the teachers were furious because he broke protocol. His classmates were stunned because he broke the unspoken rule, don't be too sincere. Don't be too moral. Don't make people uncomfortable with truth. He got scolded later. She said. He got punished. But he didn't apologize. And that's when his mother realized something that scared her more than his sensitivity ever had. Her son was willing to be disliked for the sake of defending mothers. Not because it made him look good. Not because it earned him praise. Do you believe that was right? That was the boy, she said, long before fame. Before cameras adored him. Long before fans did. He was born that way, she repeated. And this time the words sounded less like a compliment and more like a warning, like a prophecy. Because if you are born with that kind of reverence, that kind of empathy, the world doesn't always reward you. Sometimes it uses you. Sometimes it trains you. Sometimes it punishes you for caring too much. And now, with his life under constant public scrutiny, that reverence, so pure in childhood, would be tested in ways most people never see. His mother paused, looked down, and said something that made the room feel suddenly cold. A moment, she said. When I thought he would break. It fell like a stone into water. Everyone leaned in. Because they knew what she meant. They weren't asking about childhood anymore. They were asking about the cost. The price of carrying that kind of heart in a world that feeds on celebrities. A world that demands perfection and punishes vulnerability. And she was about to tell them about the moment Lee Min-ho's reverence for motherhood collided with something darker, something that shook him. And perhaps changed him forever. The story his mother told next didn't begin with fame. And with silence. A certain kind of silence exists in homes where people are trying not to scare each other. Where adults swallow fear so children can sleep. Where mothers keep their voices soft because they're afraid of what might spill out if they speak too loudly. That was the silence she described, not the peaceful kind. But the kind that feels like a glass held too full. Lee Min-ho grew up with that silence. She said, and it shaped him. Taught him to read faces the way others read textbooks. To notice what wasn't said. And that ability, so useful for an actor later, was first learned as a survival skill. Then, when he was older and his career began to rise, the silence changed form. It became the silence of exhaustion, schedules, filming, travel, interviews, pressure. The kind of life where people applaud you and still don't see you. The kind of life where you are surrounded and still alone. Others said there was a time during his early rise when he came home late at night after filming. He didn't turn on the lights. He sat at the kitchen table in the dark like someone waiting for a verdict. She thought he was just tired. Bought him food. He didn't touch it. "What's wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. And when he finally spoke, his voice sounded too quiet, as if he feared words might make the situation real. "Mom," he said, "people don't see mothers as people." That line cut through her like a blade. It wasn't a philosophical statement. It was grief. He told her that during the shoot, had been a scene involving a mother character, an older woman playing a mom in distress. The crew joked casually about the actress's emotional acting, calling it too much, mocking the intensity. Someone made a cruel remark about her age, about how she looked when she cried. People laughed. Not because it was truly funny, but because cruelty in groups becomes easy. Lee Min-ho didn't laugh. He had felt something in his chest tighten. Same feeling he had as a child hearing that stranger say mothers don't get to cry. He tried to ignore it. Had to keep working. But it burned. Finally, he confronted someone, quietly at first. Then more firmly when they brushed him off. He told them to stop. He told them it wasn't funny. He told them the actress was doing her job and that motherhood wasn't a punchline. They rolled their eyes, he said. Told him he was being sensitive. Told him to relax. And that's when he realized the terrifying truth. People didn't think mockery of mothers was cruel. They thought it was normal. Night, he sat in the dark at the kitchen table because he didn't know what to do with the anger. He had fame now. He had influence. He couldn't control the casual disrespect embedded in the world. His mother listened, her hands cold around a cup of tea. She wanted to comfort him. But she also felt a familiar ache. As she knew that world. She had lived as a mother in it. She told him, gently, "You can't fight everyone." Lee Min-ho's eyes lifted. There was something sharp there, pain turning into resolve. "I won't fight everyone," he said. "Won't let it pass when I'm there." That was when she said she began to worry, not because his heart was wrong, but because a heart like that attracts danger. It attracts expectations. It attracts people who want to use your empathy as a tool. Respect as a costume. And then came the moment she said she thought he would break. It happened after an event, one of those polished gatherings where celebrities smile under chandeliers and people pretend the world is gentle. Lee Min-ho had been invited as a guest. There were speeches, applause, cameras flashing. A mother-related charity was mentioned. Motherhood celebrated in glossy words. Afterward, backstage, he heard someone important, make a remark that turned his stomach. "Motherhood sells," the person said. Laughing. "People cry. Donate, feel good. Easy." Wasn't shouted. It was casual. Like discussing marketing strategy. Like discussing a product. Like mothers were a tool to be used for public emotion. Min-ho's mother said he came home that night with a face she didn't recognize. It wasn't anger this time. It was something closer to despair. He didn't speak much. He went to his room. Assumed he would sleep. But when she passed his door later, she heard a sound that made her stop. Crying. Not the polite kind. Not the quiet sniffle. Still crying, the kind he rarely allowed himself. She knocked gently, waited. Then opened the door. He was sitting on the floor. Against the bed, shoulders shaking. His hands covered his face like he was trying to hold himself together physically. "Min-ho," she whispered. Terrified. "What happened?" Up, eyes red, and said something that made her heart drop. "Mom, what if all this?" He gestured vaguely. "Meaning fame, meaning the world. Meaning the smiling events. What if it's all fake? What if people only love mothers when it benefits them?" It was the question of a child who had grown up and covered the world doesn't deserve the purity he carries. His mother sat beside him. Pulled him close like she used to when he was small. Didn't give him an inspirational speech. She didn't say everything would be okay. She said something harder. "Then you be real," she told him. if the world isn't. That night became a turning point, she said. In the dramatic sense of headlines, but in the quiet, lasting sense of a person deciding how they will live with their own values. After that, Lee Min-ho began doing something people didn't notice at first. He started protecting mothers in small ways. Insisted on respectful language on set. He made sure older actresses were treated with dignity. Time to thank staff who were mothers, asking about their kids with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. He stopped laughing at jokes that reduced motherhood to stereotypes. He used his fame not to preach, but to set a tone. And came the incident that truly shocked even his mother. There was a fan event, crowded, emotional, loud. People screamed his name. Phones were held high like offerings. Security tried to keep the line moving. Everything was controlled, managed. A woman in the crowd fainted. At first, it looked like a normal overwhelm moment. People assumed she was a young fan overcome by excitement. Security moved to handle it quickly. Min-ho saw something others missed. He saw the way the woman's hand clutched not a poster, not a phone, but a small child's jacket. He saw the way a little boy, maybe 5 or 6, was crying beside her, terrified. Before security could react, Min-ho stepped off the stage. Managers hissed his name, trying to stop him. The crowd roared, thinking it was some dramatic gesture. But his face was focused, urgent. He reached the woman, knelt, and spoke to her calmly while staff called for help. He looked at the child and did something that stunned everyone. He took the boy's hand. "It's okay," he told him. Breathe with me." He didn't say your mom will be fine because he knew false comfort can feel like betrayal. He simply stayed present. Paramedics arrived, helped the woman regain consciousness. She was disoriented, embarrassed. She tried to apologize. Lee Min-ho stopped her. "Don't apologize," he said gently. "You're a mother. You're allowed to be tired." Those words hit harder than any dramatic speech, because they directly contradicted the poisonous idea that mothers don't get to cry, don't get to break, get to be human. The crowd, once screaming, grew strangely quiet. People later said it felt like watching someone tear a hole through the glossy surface of celebrity events and reveal something raw underneath. Afterward, footage spread online. Fans praised him, called him kind, called him a gentleman. But his mother saw the deeper truth. He wasn't performing kindness. He was reacting from the same core that had always been there. "Born that way," she said again. But she also admitted something most people don't want to hear about people they admire. Kind of heart hurts. It hurts because it notices too much. It feels too much. It carries too much. It sees mothers not as symbols but as human beings, and once you see that, you cannot unsee it. You cannot laugh easily at shallow jokes. You cannot detach. His mother said she has watched him struggle with that. Has watched him grow quiet after reading harsh comments about women. She has watched him carry guilt for things that aren't his fault. She has watched him become angry not for himself, but for others. And yet, despite the cost, he hasn't changed. Ended her story not with a grand conclusion, but with a simple confession that felt like the final twist of a knife. "I used to worry that his respect for mothers would make him vulnerable," she said. "Now I realize, it makes him strong." Because strength isn't always loud. It isn't always aggression. Sometimes strength is refusing to treat mothers as marketing. Refusing to let the world reduce them to stereotypes. Refusing to let women who carry life be treated like background characters in their own stories. And if Lee Min-ho's mother is right, if he truly was born with that reverence, then what we are seeing isn't a celebrity image. It's a lifelong instinct that has survived pressure, fame, cruelty, and temptation. A rare kind of instinct that, in a world that often forgets the humanity of mothers, feels almost shocking. One that makes you wonder, if a child could ask, who cries for them, maybe the rest of us should finally stop looking away, and start answering. In the end, this story wasn't just about a global star or a mother's quiet confession. It was about the kind of heart that survives the world without hardening. Kind of empathy that refuses to collapse even under the weight of fame, expectations, and unseen wounds. Lee Min-ho's reverence for motherhood wasn't shaped by cameras, nor crafted for interviews. It was something woven into him long before the spotlight ever found his face. A truth carried from childhood, tested by life, and strengthened by pain. And perhaps, through his mother's voice. reminded of something we often forget. That behind every actor, every public figure, every person we cheer for, stands someone who cried in silence, endured quietly, and kept the world together without applause. Someone who taught love without speeches, and strength without noise. Thank you so much for staying with us until the final moment of this story. Your time, your curiosity, your attention mean more than you know. If this story moved you, even for a moment, I invite you to continue exploring more untold truths, deeper narratives, and the human lives behind the headlines with us here on Behind the Bulletin. Thank you for watching, for reading, feeling with us today.